Every family has their rituals. Ours wasn't fancy. Memorial Day for us was always a patchwork of nostalgia and low-key chaos, an annual migration to Grandma Louise's weathered old farmhouse, tucked at the edge of a town that seemed stuck in its own faded photograph. Our world became lawn chairs with creaky backs, Tupperware lids that never quite matched the bowls, and plastic flags poking out from the cracks in the sidewalk. Maybe, for outsiders, it looked like 100 other American holidays. But for me, there's a before and after to that one Memorial Day. The day my nephew Jamie saluted something we couldn't see, and the world I thought I knew shifted just a little, like the creak of a coffin lid in a forgotten grave. Grandma's yard was a world unto itself, bordered on one side by a stand of pines and, on the other, by the sagging fence that marked the boundary with the old church cemetery. It was the kind of place where grass grew thick and wild, where robins swooped low over headstones, and where history always seemed just out of reach, watching with silent patience. That year, the family arrived in stages, each car a clown car of kids, coolers, and Uncle Dave's signature coleslaw that nobody actually liked but everyone dutifully scooped onto their plates. My sister, Maribel, arrived last, her 7-year-old son Jamie in tow, clutching a rock collection he'd gathered from every rest stop along the highway. Jamie was the youngest of the brood, a pale, wide-eyed kid with a mop of uncooperative hair and sneakers at least 2 sizes too big. He was, to put it politely, an odd duck, more interested in examining ants than chasing after cousins, and always carrying a battered sketchbook full of cryptic little drawings. You know the type. The kind of child grown-ups describe as sensitive, but who you suspect sees things most people miss. We set up in the usual way, checkered blankets sprawled across the lumpy lawn, pitchers of lemonade sweating in the heat, and Grandpa's old transistor radio humming with patriotic marches in the background. Every year, someone would inevitably make a joke about the ghosts next door, and every year, we'd laugh a little too loudly, glancing at the iron fence. But this year, something was different. There was a weight in the air, a sense that we were not entirely alone. It was just after noon when I noticed Jamie standing at the edge of the property, barely a blur against the white picket fence. He was alone, as usual, gazing out over the field that separated Grandma's house from the cemetery. The grass there was longer, wildflowers poking up in tufts, and the wind carried the faint sound of distant church bells. I wandered over, expecting to find him sifting through rocks or sketching in his book. But instead, he stood ramrod straight, chest puffed out, his right hand raised in a salute. Not a half-hearted wave, not the lazy imitation of a child. This was crisp, practiced, serious. He held it for nearly a minute, his gaze locked on a spot just beyond the fence on the graves. "What ya doing, bud?" I called, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't flinch. Didn't lower his arm. Didn't even blink. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "I'm saying hi to the man," he said. I followed his eyes but saw only wind rustling the branches and the mottled gray stones. "What man?" I asked. "The one in the funny hat and jacket." He waved first. Something in the way Jamie said it made the hairs on my arm stand up. I laughed, but it came out too quick, too high. "Probably just your imagination," I said, but my words felt thin. Jamie lowered his arm and shrugged, as if I'd missed something obvious. Back at the picnic, the adults talked politics and recipes, the older kids tossed a football, and the smell of charred burgers drifted through the air. But Jamie kept glancing over his shoulder, eyes drawn back to the fence and the silent, sun-dappled cemetery beyond. At first, nobody paid much attention. Jamie was always off in his own world. But as the afternoon wore on, he did it again and again. Every hour or so, he'd break away from the crowd, wander to the same spot, and salute. His face would go solemn, his small body almost trembling with the effort to stand perfectly still. I tried to distract him, suggesting we play tag or join the others for a game of cornhole, but he just shook his head. "I have to wait," he said, as if he'd been given a job only he could do. My aunt noticed too. "He's just being respectful," she said, patting me on the back. "Maybe he's seen us salute the flag or something." But it felt different. There was a ritual to it, a gravity that had nothing to do with mimicry and everything to do with belief. As the sun crept lower, Jamie became more anxious. He'd mutter under his breath, eyes darting from the headstones to the sky. Sometimes, I'd catch snippets of what he was saying. "He's watching. He misses someone. He says thank you." Each time, my heart would stutter, a cold line of dread slithering up my spine. I told myself it was just kid stuff, just the wild imagination of a child overdosed on cartoons and sugar. But the cemetery took on a new menace. The stones seemed to lean forward, as if straining to hear. I tried to reason with Jamie, tried to break the spell. "There's nobody there, Jamie. You know that, right?" He looked at me, his eyes impossibly wide. "You don't see him. But he sees you." That night, during dinner, the conversation drifted toward the war, my grandfather's service, the friends he lost, the medals he kept in a shoebox under the bed. Every time someone said soldier or battle, Jamie would freeze, his fork halfway to his mouth, gaze sliding toward the window. As dusk bled into night, the laughter faded. The older kids retreated indoors for board games, and the grown-ups sipped coffee on the porch. Jamie slipped away again, barefoot now, moving silently over the damp grass. I followed, my curiosity sharpening into concern. There he was, standing by the fence again. This time, he wasn't alone. Or at least, it felt that way. He stood motionless, hand raised in a perfect salute, eyes fixed on the darkness between the gravestones. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw a shape flicker, something tall, shadowy, and indistinct, wearing what looked like a hat. I blinked, and it was gone. Jamie didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stood there, honoring something only he could see. His mother found him there, shivering in the cold, tears slipping down his cheeks. She scooped him up, whispering soft comforts, but he never took his eyes off the graves. We left early the next morning. The house felt different, emptier, like we'd carried something away with us. Jamie barely spoke the whole ride home, and when we asked what he'd seen, he just shook his head. For years after, every Memorial Day, Jamie would grow distant and quiet. He'd stare out windows, scanning the horizon, as if searching for a command or waiting for a familiar face among the dead. We never talked about it again. The family, in its way, pretended nothing had happened. But the memory lingered, growing sharper every year. Maybe, I sometimes thought, the ones we honor on Memorial Day find their own ways to honor us. Maybe the past isn't past at all, but something that lives in the spaces between the stones, the stories, and the living. I've often wondered what Jamie saw that day, if it was just a child's imagination, or if the world is stranger and older than we'd like to admit. Sometimes, I dream of the old cemetery, of figures standing at attention among the graves, saluting not just the living, but the memory of being remembered. Either way, I know this: every Memorial Day, when the church bells ring and the wind stirs the grass, I find myself watching the fence, waiting for a sign. And sometimes, just sometimes, I raise my hand and salute, hoping that somewhere, someone salutes back. Years passed, but the unease of that Memorial Day never quite left us. Life moved on, kids grew, new jobs, new faces at family gatherings, but every May, as flags blossomed along the roads and bugles played on TV, something in Jamie shifted. He'd avoid crowds, skip out on games, and fall silent for hours at a time. Once, when he was 9, I found him sketching quietly in Grandma's attic. His paper was filled not with rocks or trees, but with the same image over and over: a tall man in an old uniform, face shadowed by the brim of a hat, one hand raised in a ghostly salute. "What's he saying?" I asked, half teasing, half afraid. Jamie only shrugged. "Nothing bad. He just misses someone." I thought it was a phase, like collecting bugs or being scared of thunder. But as Jamie grew, so did the depth of his silence and the certainty that what he saw was more than just a child's imagination. It was only when Jamie turned 12, after another wordless Memorial Day spent staring toward the cemetery, that my curiosity broke the family's unofficial rule of silence. That June, I drove back to Grandma's on my own, intent on finding out who or what had haunted our family's picnics. The old church cemetery wasn't large. A cluster of white stones, most tilted and mottled by rain, shaded by yew trees that seemed to swallow sunlight. I wandered row by row, reading faded names, veterans from wars most people forgot, their ranks and dates etched in lichen. Toward the rear, I found it. A tall, iron fence guarding a corner where the grass grew wildest. There, beneath a weathered maple, stood a grave marker different from the rest. The stone was tall, its inscription barely legible. Private Elijah Cook. Company F, 115th Infantry. Born 1899, died 1918. He watched the home front, even from afar. Beside the stone, a metal flag holder glinted in the sun, empty now. Someone had once honored him, but the decades had worn the memory thin. I tried to picture him, young, scared, lonely, watching over this patch of earth even after death. A chill traced my spine. It all fit. The uniform. The funny hat. The endless watching. When I told Jamie what I'd found, he listened quietly, then asked, "Did anyone leave him flowers?" That simple question made something ache inside me. Determined to unravel more, I dove into old records, church bulletins, town archives, yellowed newspaper clippings in Grandma's attic. The story that emerged was both tragic and eerily familiar. Private Elijah Cook had been the youngest of 5 brothers, sent to France at 19 during the last days of World War I. He never made it home. Family legend claimed he'd promised to watch over the home front for his mother, writing long letters about the farmhouse, the church bells, the field where he'd played as a boy. After the war, Elijah's mother died heartbroken, and the family plot sat undisturbed for decades. Locals spoke of seeing a young man in uniform near the fence, especially on Memorial Day, always watching, always waiting. I shuddered to realize, for all our laughter and skepticism, the line between past and present was thinner than we'd ever believed. The next year, when Memorial Day approached, Jamie was 14. He seemed older, thinner, the childhood softness fading from his face. Grandma had grown frail, her stories now drifting between memory and dream. That morning, Jamie asked if we could walk the cemetery together. He didn't bring his sketchbook. He didn't need to. As we neared Elijah Cook's grave, Jamie stopped. The sun filtered through the branches, dappling his face in light and shadow. "He's still here," Jamie said quietly, eyes shining. But not angry. Just waiting. We knelt beside the grave, and Jamie placed a single wildflower, a purple aster, at its base. Then, with a solemnity beyond his years, he raised his arm in a final, perfect salute. This time, I stood with him. For a moment, the air shimmered, sunlight seemed to gather around us, warm and weightless. I swear I heard the faintest sound, like boots on dew-wet grass, and a breeze that carried the distant echo of a bugle. Jamie didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on something I would never see. He whispered, "You can rest now. We remember." After that day, Jamie changed. He still grew quiet every May, but there was a peace to his silence, a lifting of the heavy watchfulness that had dogged him for so long. At the next picnic, he joined the games, laughed with cousins, and even gave Grandma's coleslaw a second try. When he passed the fence, he would sometimes pause and nod, but the burden had eased. The family never spoke of the old soldier again. But every Memorial Day, someone would leave a flower by Elijah Cook's stone. Sometimes a wild aster, sometimes a faded poppy from the grocery store. It didn't matter. What mattered was the remembering. As years rolled by, the farmhouse faded into memory. The picnics grew smaller, faces changing with the seasons of life. Jamie went off to college, then to work, carrying with him the quiet knowledge of things unseen. And me? I still return, now and then, to walk the old churchyard. Sometimes, when the sunlight bends just so and the wind stirs the grass, I think I see a flicker of movement, a shadow among the stones, a hand raised in silent salute. We are all watched, all remembered, in ways we may never understand. On Memorial Day, when the church bells ring and families gather in the warmth of sun and memory, I find myself saluting, too. Not just for the ones who never came home, but for those who wait, year after year, for someone to remember their names. And sometimes if you listen closely you might hear a whisper in the wind. Thank you. I can rest now. There are stories every small town whispers but never writes down. Some about love, some about betrayal, but the scariest ones, those are about places. Places with memory. The farmhouse was one of them, tucked beyond the reach of streetlights, surrounded by rustling fields and trees that always seemed to shiver even when there was no wind. Every Memorial Day, Kyle's family invited a handful of us to that old property. We'd come for the bonfires and ghost stories, pretending to be braver than we were, each of us desperate to escape the quiet misery of high school for a weekend. No parents hovering, no exams looming, just endless acres, a fridge full of sodas, and the unspoken challenge, who would last the longest after dark. That year, there were 5 of us. Kyle, of course the unspoken leader, always game for a dare but the first to look over his shoulder when things got weird. Marcus, all swagger and sarcasm, but so jumpy you'd think he drank espresso instead of water. Jenna, with her sharp wit and sharper eyes, never letting anyone see she was scared. Ray, the skeptic, who thought every ghost story was just physics and old pipes. And me, the observer, always the one to remember the details others forgot, even when I wished I could let them go. We arrived just before dusk, our car crunching down the gravel driveway, headlights flickering against the peeling white paint of the farmhouse. The house looked old enough to have seen the Civil War and stubborn enough to still be standing. Its windows were dusty, catching the dying sun, and the porch creaked, a welcome or a warning, depending on how you heard it. Kyle's parents waved, hauling coolers and paper plates inside. The grown UPS would disappear into their own world soon enough, leaving us the run of the place. As the sky turned indigo and fireflies blinked in the tall grass, we claimed our beds, tossed our bags in the corners, and made half-serious plans for mischief. There's a kind of electricity in the air when you're young, on the edge of summer, and certain nothing can really hurt you. I remember laughing too loud, racing Ray around the wraparound porch, and daring Jenna to poke her head into the root cellar. The house, for all its gloom, felt alive, like it was waking up just for us. But it was Marcus who first mentioned the attic. Bet nobody's brave enough to hide up there tonight, he said, waggling his eyebrows in challenge. Kyle just grinned. Wait till dark, tough guy. See if you're still so sure. None of us knew then what was waiting for us above those creaky stairs. Night at the farmhouse was a different creature. The fields turned black, swallowing all but the halo of porch lights. The wind picked up, whistling through the old windows, and the house itself began to groan, like it was settling or sighing or maybe remembering. The grown UPS clustered around the kitchen table, swapping stories and toasting to absent friends. We built a small fire outside, roasted marshmallows, and told jokes that got darker with each retelling. But the real thrill wasn't the fire, it was what waited inside. Someone, maybe Jenna, suggested hide and seek, almost like it was inevitable. Midnight, the witching hour. Why not tempt fate? What else were country weekends for? We laid down the rules. No hiding outside. Flashlights only, no phones. The attic was fair game. My heart hammered, excitement tangled with something colder, something like dread. But I pushed it down. This was what we'd come for, fear without real danger. Or so we thought. Kyle was at first, counting loudly by the front door while we scattered like leaves. I slipped upstairs, careful to avoid the spots everyone would check first. The old house was a maze of doors, closets, forgotten corners. I ducked behind an ancient armoire on the second floor, the wood smelling of mothballs and time. My flashlight's beam was thin, barely cutting the gloom. Every footstep on the floorboards felt magnified, echoing in the hollow quiet. I pressed my back against the armoire and tried not to breathe too loudly. That's when I heard it, the whisper. Too soft to catch the words, but close, so close it felt like someone was right behind the door. My skin prickled. I froze, listening hard. Footsteps creaked, moving just beyond my hiding place. I peered through the narrow gap in the door, expecting to see Kyle's flashlight beam. Nothing. A chill snaked up my spine. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe someone else was hiding nearby. I squeezed my eyes shut and counted backward from 10, waiting for the footsteps to fade. They didn't. Instead, they grew louder, slow, deliberate, not at all like the shuffling, giggling steps of my friends. Whoever it was, they were searching. Not just for me, but for something. Somewhere downstairs, I heard a shriek, Jenna's fake horror voice, followed by laughter and the slam of a door. Relief loosened my muscles. This was just a game. Right? I moved to switch positions, tiptoeing down the hall toward the back staircase. That's when the house seemed to shift. The air thickened. Shadows bled into the corners, refusing to budge under my flashlight's glow. From the landing, I caught a glimpse of Ray darting into the laundry room, his sneakers flashing in the beam. But there was someone else, a movement at the edge of the attic stairs. A tall, thin shadow, just out of focus. Marcus. I called, voice barely above a whisper. No answer. I swallowed, telling myself not to be stupid, not to let my imagination get the better of me. But the feeling didn't fade. It grew, pushing me toward the staircase, like I had to see for myself what was up there. By the time I reached the base of the attic stairs, the house had gone eerily quiet. Even the adults seemed hushed, their laughter muffled behind closed doors. I could see dust motes swirling in the slant of moonlight from the attic window. The door was ajar, swinging gently on its hinges. I hesitated, flashlight trembling in my grip. That's when Marcus barreled past me, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Told you losers I'd make it up here first, he crowed, bounding up the steps 2 at a time. Don't stay too long. I called after him, only half joking. He vanished into the darkness, the floorboards groaning under his weight. The silence rushed back, heavy and absolute. Downstairs, someone started counting again. The game was still on. I forced myself to look away from the attic, suddenly desperate to find the others. To find light, voices, anything but the sucking silence that filled that part of the house. But as I moved away, I heard Marcus's voice, at first playful, then sharp. Guys. Very funny. Let me out. The attic door slammed shut. We all converged on the attic staircase, our flashlights crisscrossing in the gloom. Marcus was banging on the door, voice rising in panic. Stop messing around. Let me out, damn it. Kyle yanked at the door. It wouldn't budge. Ray tried the old brass knob, it spun, but the latch stayed stuck. Inside, Marcus's voice changed. Someone's up here, he whispered, hoarse and broken. They're calling my name, but it's not you. It's not you. None of us said a word. Even Ray stopped making jokes. After what felt like hours, the door finally creaked open on its own. Marcus stumbled out, face as white as the attic dust, eyes rimmed with tears he'd never admit to. Behind him, the attic stretched black and endless, the air colder than the rest of the house. No one wanted to look. No one wanted to ask who or what had been up there with him. We abandoned the game after that. No one wanted to hide, or count, or even stay inside. We drifted out to the porch, wrapped in blankets, talking about anything but what had happened. Marcus barely spoke. When he did, his voice was hollow. "She kept calling me by my name," he said. "But it wasn't any of you." It sounded old. Sad. The rest of us traded uneasy glances. Jenna squeezed his hand. Ray, for once, had nothing smart to say. I lay awake for hours, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Every groan, every sigh, sounded like footsteps. I told myself it was just wind, just pipes, just old wood settling. But I didn't believe it. By morning, none of us felt the same. The farmhouse looked harmless in the golden light, as if it hadn't nearly scared us to death just hours before. We packed our bags in silence, barely meeting each other's eyes. Kyle's parents fussed over breakfast, oblivious to the tension. We ate in silence, the clink of silverware unbearably loud. As we loaded the car, I glanced up at the attic window. For just a second, I thought I saw a shape move, a pale face, watching. But when I blinked, it was gone. We left the farmhouse in silence, dust trailing the car, the old place shrinking behind us with every mile. No one blasted music. No one scrolled through their phones. I stared out the window, half expecting to see the attic window watching us go, a pale silhouette pressed against the glass. When I finally looked back, the house was gone, swallowed by trees, as if it never wanted witnesses. The air in the car was heavy. Kyle drove, eyes straight ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Marcus sat hunched beside him, hoodie pulled tight, staring at nothing. Jenna chewed her nails. Ray kept fiddling with his backpack zipper, opening and closing it over and over, like if he just kept moving, the fear couldn't catch up. I wanted to ask if anyone else had seen that shape in the window, but the words stuck in my throat. Scene 2, back to normal? Returning to suburbia felt like stepping into another universe. The days blurred together: school, chores, parents asking how the trip went. Fun, I'd lie. Same as always. But at night, I'd hear the attic door slam in my dreams, see shadows stretching across unfamiliar ceilings. Marcus stopped answering our group texts. The day after we got back, he skipped school. When I finally called, his mom said he was sick, a cold, maybe the flu, but his voice sounded small, nothing like the Marcus I knew. He wouldn't talk about the farmhouse, wouldn't even joke about ghosts anymore. Ray, once a loudmouth skeptic, started carrying a flashlight everywhere. For emergencies, he said. Jenna, usually unshakable, began sleeping with her bedroom light on. Kyle dove into distractions: basketball, video games, anything loud and bright. As for me, I started seeing movement in the corners of my vision. Whispers at the edge of sleep. I wrote it off as imagination. I had to. Scene 3, the anniversary. A year passed. Memorial Day rolled around, and with it, memories I'd tried to bury. Kyle's family, out of habit or stubbornness, planned another trip to the farmhouse. Only this time, no one volunteered to go. Kyle texted. Anyone down for a rematch? No attic this time, promise. No one replied. Late that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, first in months. You ever feel like something followed us home? Before I could answer, Jenna chimed in. I still hear her sometimes. The voice from the attic. She says my name in dreams. Ray sent a single flashlight emoji. Kyle just wrote, "Let's never talk about that night again." Summer faded into fall, but the sense of being watched never left. I saw Marcus once at the library. He looked older, thinner, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He avoided the stacks near the top floor, said he didn't like the way the light looked up there. Jenna confessed she'd started keeping a journal, filling it with the same sentence over and over when she couldn't sleep, "It's only a game." Ray, who'd always mocked my stories, now insisted on leaving every door in his house open, never wanting to risk another door getting stuck. At night, I dreamed of the farmhouse, the attic door creaking open, a shadow spilling out onto the landing, a voice both familiar and impossibly old whispering my name. Another Memorial Day. I drove by the old road leading to the farmhouse, meaning only to pass, but something, curiosity, guilt, unfinished business made me slow down. The grass was taller than I remembered, wild and untamed. The house looked smaller, windows dark and empty, porch sagging a little more. I thought about getting out, just to look. But then, as the wind rattled the trees, I heard a sound, the unmistakable creak of the attic window opening. A flicker of movement, a face, pale as memory, staring out. For a split second, I saw Marcus standing behind the glass. Or maybe it was just my own reflection, warped by fear. I drove away fast, heart pounding, telling myself it was just a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew the truth, that house hadn't let us go. Not really. That night, our old group chat lit up again. Kyle wrote first. "Anyone else have weird dreams tonight?" Jenna. She was at the window again. Ray. "Did you guys ever hear what happened in the attic, before Kyle's family moved in?" Marcus. Finally. "The game isn't over. Not until she finds someone new." No one replied after that. I turned off my phone, but sleep didn't come. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of footsteps on old floorboards, and the creak of a door opening, somewhere far away or maybe much, much closer. People say ghosts haunt houses, but sometimes, it's the house that haunts you. Maybe we left the farmhouse that night, but pieces of us never really escaped. Every Memorial Day, I wonder if the attic window is waiting, if the shadows are still shifting, if the game will ever truly be over. Or if, somewhere out there, new kids are daring each other to hide upstairs, thinking fear is just for fun right up until the moment the attic door slams shut.